Well, hi everyone. I'm Craig Hamilton Parker, psychic medium, and welcome to my show, Coffee with Craig. Well, today I cast the Ye Ching to ask what will be happening in the world soon, and it gave the result of the hexagram called revolution. So, is change coming? Will there be a worldwide revolution? I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about particularly what's happening in Europe. I want to talk about some of the things that they call far right. And I also want to talk about how we should respond to these things. If there's unconscious forces in the world, which I sometimes call them, the mind of the crowd, how should we react? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a spiritual talk at the end and at the beginning, share a few thoughts, make a few predictions. So welcome to Coffee with Craig. Well, hi again, everyone, and thanks for joining me again. And don't forget, if you come here regularly, do please give us a thumbs up because it helps the algorithm. And if you're free for the first time, do a like and share and follow and so forth, so you get notifications by hitting that little bell. And so you can catch up on my predictions and the things I have to say and some of my thoughts here too. So today I've had a few odd predictions in, but mainly I want to sort of share some sort of look at the bigger picture of things in many ways, a bigger picture of where the world is going at the moment, because I think a lot of us have a feeling that change is coming. Oh, and before I go on, actually, there was another prediction came up recently, didn't it, as well, that I'd made. I said one of the royal family would be in an accident, and we had Princess Anne in a horse accident in which she is under concussion. So we wish her well and hope she gets better soon. She seems to be already recovering. But another prediction that came true. So a number of you were putting quite a few comments about that, and I forgot to mention it on the show. Anyway, it's not here for self-praise. We're here to have a think about where we're going in the world, because, like I said, there's a feeling, I think, with all of us that a kind of a change is coming. And could this be like the Ye Ching has suggested, that there would be a global revolution? Now, those of you that don't know the Ye Ching, it's an old Chinese oracle, thousands of years old. I use it sometimes part of my work, sometimes when I'm doing readings. I've been using it since I was about 14 years old. I find it really helpful oracle, although it's how you interpret it that's important. Like, I've been using it since 14 and it's taken me a lifetime to truly understand it, I think, and I don't think you ever do truly understand it. It's not like the NAADI oracle that's in the on the site as well, where I go to India and consult the NAADI. That's even more mind-boggling. So those of you that follow this will know a bit about the NAADI, which incidentally, I'm doing a workshop on that coming up. So there's a few spaces left on that if anybody wants to do a workshop or indeed wants to book their NAADI reading, in the description. But the Ye Ching gave me this oracle. It gave me just the revolution, no moving lines. So it said this, and this is the judgment. Let's just look at the quick judgment of this hexagram. It says, revolution. On your own day, you are believed. Supreme success. Furthering through perseverance, remorse disappears. Now, those of you that might have explored the Ye Ching or will know a little bit about it will know that this is a hexagram that talks about revolution, as it were, both on a worldly stage and also within oneself. So one could cast this hexagram and it can show major changes within yourself and changes in one's life. But I asked the hexagram, about what is happening in the world now. And so this kind of predicts ahead that there's going to be major changes and upheaval in the way ahead. And I think we're all beginning to feel a feeling that there's something coming. The world's undergoing a period of significant transformation at the moment. There's more elections going on now than pretty well any other time in its history, I reckon. All over Europe, all over America, all over everywhere, there's elections going on, for good and bad. So this revolution could very much be a political, social, cultural change, and a real shift in the status quo. And I think we need it, do we? It can mean also literally the hexagram can also mean abolishing the old. Another way of interpreting it, rather than just overthrowing things. It's like overthrowing old systems, so that existing systems, institutions, for example, old ways of thinking are being changed and replaced at this time. And so there's a sense in the air of disruption as outdated structures are dismantled. And of course, with every revolution, there comes opportunities for renewal and opportunities of all sorts for people's lives. We've also, of course, got the revolution coming of artificial intelligence too, which is going to be bigger than the Industrial Revolution. It's going to change not just the way we work, but it's going to also change the way we think. And it's going to change the importance of intelligent people in society. The Industrial Revolution ruined the working classes, I suppose you could say. But the AI revolution will ruin the intellectual classes, where suddenly intelligence becomes unnecessary. Anyway, so there's going to be a period because of this of uncertainty and instability. It's a period of transformation, but it's also marked always these periods by uncertainty. And the outcome is not yet clear yet. This hexagram would not necessarily say the revolution's happened yet, but there's a process of change. And according to the Ye Ching, this can sometimes be a tumultuous period of change ahead. So we need to think about this. What is the nature of these things? How will it affect the world? How will it affect us individually? And most importantly, how will it affect us from a spiritual standpoint? What can we do about it? So, I mean, a lot of the news has been about America. I mean, yes, we know that there's a kind of a revolution happening there with Donald Trump. I've predicted already that Trump will become president again, and I'm predicting that ages ago. Even a lot of psychics still say he's not going to become president, because those psychics are all based in California mainly, and all Democrats. So sadly, always our thinking can be colored by our own beliefs, and that's always difficult for me as well, and that's the same for everybody. So we've obviously got a bit of a revolution going on in America already, and that's going to be pretty major. We might come back to that in a moment. But also, those of us joining from America, I don't know how aware you are just what's happening here, both in the UK and in Europe. And we always talk about this idea of the traditional media, as it were, not serving us the truth. And I think the more you watch politics on television, the more you think, oh my God, they're just not saying things not giving anybody a chance, because they talk about anybody that disagrees with the kind of the left-wing agenda that's flooded the world. And I think this is where the revolution is going to come against. It's going to come against this extreme leftism, or extreme liberalism, you could call it, that's happening in the world, which is characterized very much by things like woke. And it's also characterized by the censorship mentality of the world and the canceling sort of nature of the world. And you disagree with anything that anybody says, whatever it might be, whatever topic, you're a racist. It's making everything, it's making any intellectual debate taboo. And I think there's a surge against that with people, and we're beginning to see, particularly in things like the BBC, we're beginning to see that the language they use is almost dismissive of argument. Anybody that thinks other than their strong left-wing agenda is called a popularist. So a popularist, it's like somebody, it means kind of the will of the people. It's where you kind of take, you seem to assume in popularism that all establishment is wrong, that all the institutions of the world is wrong, and so forth. And though they brand it as popularist, but it's not. It's not popularist. It's actually what the will of the people is that they ignore at their peril. And we're beginning to see that very much in the way people are rethinking things. Anything that's not left is always considered as being this thing of far right. So, you're far right if you disagree with this, but actually the agendas that are on the stage at the moment are very much far left. And here in the UK, again, for those joining us from America and so forth, what unfortunately it means is the so-called right, which is people that believe in, I don't know, I can't really describe the values exactly in a sentence, I suppose, but anybody that doesn't agree with this wokey sort of agenda, basically, is kind of split, because we've got a split in our political parties at the moment with the rise of reform and the decline of what we call the Conservative Party over here. And it's meaning that the left wing, the extreme woke agenda, is going to come storming in, even though I think the majority of people don't want that. So we've got an election about to happen in a few days. I've made my predictions about that. I feel that Labour will get in. There will be a huge vote for reform, but it will be not generate anything like the number of seats they need, but it will be a surprising number. It will be a new voice. There will be a swing against Greens, I feel. I think this is going to start happening around the world, actually, and in particular in places like Germany, where the Green Party has been very, very strong for a long time. But there's already been a lot of strong feeling against green agendas, with all this imposition of heat pumps, for example, and things like that really rubbed people up the wrong way, because you start to think, well, this isn't practical. And also, if you look at the way Russia can determine European politics by simply turning a pipe and turning off the pipelines, or stopping the ships of compressed gas coming into Europe. If we can't get it through the pipeline, we'll send it in by a boat. We'll make loads of money. We can fund whatever wars we want, whether we storm into Ukraine, or we storm into Poland, or we storm into the Scandinavian countries. I mean, we fund wars against ourselves. Anyway, so I think there's a strong movement we're going to see over this coming period in this kind of revolution, a kind of anti-green, which is sad in so many levels, but because the problem is it's gone so far. You get all these guys that throw orange paint all over Just Stop Oil, the people, daft idiots throwing paint all over our cultural icons and all over our Stonehenge and the paintings and so forth, and really they've shot themselves in the foot and really turn the consciousness of the country against people like that. So we're going to see a strong, in this period ahead, we're going to, I predict that we see a very strong movement against green and about repumping oil, even though that might not happen here in the UK yet, because we'll have a Labour government. But I feel there's going to be strong public moves towards that. So the popularist BBC is pushing an agenda against all these things, but the hope in many respects for the revolution as such, if a revolution is a good thing, revolutions are not always a good thing, because when a revolution comes, it brings with it, I suppose, revolutionary waves. If you think what happened in the big revolution that happened in the French Revolution, I mean, that triggered the American War of Independence. That triggered many other revolutions throughout Europe. It triggered the rise of France and the rise of Napoleon and the conquest of Russia, and then ultimately, I suppose, the Russian Revolution after that. And even France's influence, for example, spread into China and created the Vietnam War. I mean, all these things. One revolution can it can fire off many others, and that applies to all the revolutions that have happened in the world. So if we start to see a revolution now, particularly in Europe, which is something that I've talked about before, because I've said I ultimately see the fall of Europe. I see the breakup of the Europe into like smaller common market style countries with affiliations between Germany and Austria, for example, and Poland and places, but France maybe having affiliations with Spain and so forth, like a split into multiple blocks, as it were, federations. But we could see that almost beginning to happen. You know, if you followed this channel for a long time, I've made a lot of predictions early on about the demise and the fall of Europe and the breakup of Europe. And I said, going way back, 2015 or something, I can't remember when it was now, a long way back, I said that Marie Le Pen would become the leader of France. And of course, France has a strange sort of leadership setup because it has both a prime minister, as it were, and a president. So, but already they're beginning to sweep the board there. A few months ago, I said that Macron would fall from power. That's another prediction that's happened or starting to happen. He's not fallen. I'm wrong there yet. But can we not see now that those seeds are beginning to come to light? And so I think what's going to happen there in France, first of all, there's going to be a stitch up. I think you'll see some coalitions being formed that will try to keep Le Pen out of power. And there will be strong moves almost to try to usurp that election, just as many people believe that the American elections were usurped, because it seems like anybody that doesn't agree with these far left agendas, we never call them far left, they all seem to think that's the normal agenda, but it's not the norm. Those far left agendas that have been dominating the world for so long will try and stitch things up like they do it by using the law, by using the institutions, by using the establishment to try to stop things. So I think we're going to see some real major upheavals with lots of public unrest and protests going on again in France. We're seeing it already, this is something again I predicted, but we're going to see a lot more of that as people feel that we're being stitched up and made to have coalitions when this is what we voted for. So that's already happening in France. It's not going to die. It's not going to die down. It's going to get worse. I also predict that the Paris Olympics are going to be seriously disrupted by public unrest. I see disruption affecting the Paris Olympics. There's going to be serious problems there. And I feel that there's going to be quite a lot of violence happening in France as people begin to, they vote, but their votes don't count. This is what tends to happen when dominance happens of the wrong side, not the wrong side. There's no wrong and right side. What am I saying? But I mean, if they feel that the wrong side is taken, their vote's not been counted again, you know. And then of course it's easy to blame people and say, oh, Le Pen's just like Trump. She's inciting violence, which is not the case. Of course, they feared all this in Italy when Meloni came to power, and now Meloni doesn't seem to be doing too bad a job. She's not the evil person that they thought she was. But you see, this is the revolution I think the Ye Ching's talking about here. I mean, we've seen it in Italy. We've seen it in France, two of the big players in Europe. And we're seeing it beginning to sort of happen again in Germany with alternative to Germany parties, you know, and you see Schultz shaking with what's going on here. There's a lot going on in Germany. And I think, again, you remember I was saying this such a long while back that this would happen, that Europe's going to go far right and it's all going to break up, because how can we run this type of European community in the same way? It's all very well if everybody's sort of has this left agenda, but if they've all looking after themselves a bit more and say, look, we don't want the free movement of people, could Europe survive without the free movement of people? Because that's going to have to be the question that comes up. We're going to see the same things happening. And I said it before, but it's all happening now. We're seeing it already brewing in places like Hungary. We're seeing it brewing in places like Slovakia. We've seen it happen in the Netherlands. And this is perhaps in many ways the fall of Europe as we know it. But I think ultimately a much more ultimately a fairer Europe, because they call it all far right. But is it? Or is it just the will of the people? Isn't it the fact that people have got fed up being told what they're supposed to do? Fed up that, you know, your culture is not important. Your your history is not important. Everything that represents your country is wrong, that you were colonialists and empire builders. And now we've got to flood the country with thousands and millions of people who are frankly not compatible with the culture that you've got here, and you've got to pay all the money you've paid in through national insurance, for example, and things like that here in the UK. That all has to fund not just dental treatment for the people that already can't get dental treatment, for example, but the dental treatment for the whole world, pretty much. It's the National Health Service that will support the whole world with the National Health Service. So no wonder it all starts to collapse. And whatever party we've got in, whether here in the UK it be Conservative or Labour, it's the same old answer. We just cannot support it. And Europe cannot support it. And what we're getting is a revolution. So we got almost an unprecedented revolutionary wave happening in Europe. But remember, the world now is a global community. We all go on about the importance of globalism and all working as a global community so that the big companies can make even more money. And the problem is we're getting a global revolution. We've never had a global revolution before, have we? We've never had a global. It's always been limited to countries that set off other countries. But a global revolution could be political, it could be cultural, it could be religious, spiritual, it could be all of them, all together. And I think there's a sort of a surge in everybody at the moment. I think the Ching's highlighted there what's going to happen, and of course we're going to see other things. We're going to, for example, I've been predicting that we'll see the fall of Joe Biden before the election. And now it's starting to seem true. When I first put that video up about Joe Biden will fall, people were sort of, wow, yeah, we'll wait and see. I don't think that's going to happen. They'll keep him in. Now, even the Democrats are talking about pulling Joe Biden out because he's no good a candidate for them. He's making more trouble. And it's really who's behind the wheel of this. On the one hand, we start seeing his wife more or less manipulate him like a child. And then, of course, we've also got, other forces in the background, the previous candidates and things about Joe Obama and people like that. So we're starting to see the crumbling of Europe. We're starting to see the crumbling of America, really. In Britain, we've got everybody's voting for one sort of thing, but it's split vote. So we're getting we're almost going the opposite direction. We're back into woke land in Britain, and that's going to be a very interesting thing going on, with Europe going right and Britain that left Europe going left. But we kind of can all sense, though, behind all this, we can all sense that there's changes in the air. There's a change coming, and it's whether it's for the good or it's for the bad, I don't know. I mean, it's change. Change is sometimes necessary. When things become outdated, things become rotten, things got to change. Okay, so that's some of my thoughts about a few predictions we've woven in there, you'll hear. But those are some of my thoughts about what's happening in the world. But I now want to just think a little bit more in terms of spiritually on these things, because, I was thinking about this. And when you get these sort of almost gut feelings that something, I often look at the world and think, when I try to make a prediction about things, I often try to look at the world as if it's a person, and what is that person feeling? And it's almost like Mr. World is, or Mr. or Mrs. World is thinking, oh, something's going on, something's changing. I feel uncomfortable. I feel I want to move. And just like a person, people live, they don't live consciously, right? And it's the same on a worldwide stage. People don't live consciously. Often, I gave that talk the other day about how the relationship between the mind and the spirit, the mind, and the body in particular, and how we live in an unconscious way. For example, we live by our endocrine system. Basically, triggers many of the things we think of as our feelings, and many of the things we think of as our thoughts and being us, as just a response of the endocrine system, and that the spirit is somehow different to this. But that's all in the behavioral system of the human form, in the bodily sheath, as we call it, of the human being, the first level of the human consciousness. So we live in that area unconsciously, and most people behave unconsciously in the world. They're not awake. They're not fully awake. They're responding. They're reacting. They're acting through behavior. They're acting through the bodily forces. Very dangerous when you put a lot of people together and you get a crowd, because I talk about the political unrest that I feel will come in the world, when we start to look at all the things that haven't been addressed: defense, agriculture, security, asylum seekers, environment, all those type of things are all potential fire pots, aren't they, to explode at some point. So we're likely to get all sorts of on street crowds, and what happens when we get a crowd of people is people still behave unconsciously, but they behave differently to their normal behavior. They behave differently. If you watch a crowd of people, whether you go to see Taylor Swift, or you go to see a football match, or you go to see a Nazi rally, not that I do, but you know what I mean? There's a different consciousness, and that can be controlled by people. And that is kind of sometimes quite a danger, because people get lost in the excitement of being in crowds. They get lost in the excitement of a protest march, whether it be for something like Palestine, or whether it be a protest against oil, or whether it be a protest for oil, or whatever. You get lost in the moment, you get lost in the crowd, and people have this sense of losing personal responsibility. See, within what I teach, I've come from spiritualism. I will say one of the most important things that any of us can have is taking personal responsibility for our spiritual path, taking personal responsibility for our karma, and saying all the troubles that have happened to me are me, nothing more than me unfolding. And when we know that, then we can address it. But people don't want to do that. People love the excuse to fall into unconsciousness. People love the excuse to fall kind of into a sleep, because it gives you the excuse to behave badly and to drop all your norms. I think there's a psychological term for this. I think it's called de-individualization, or de-individuation, I think they call it. So basically, you become antisocial when you form a large group of people. And I believe in the collective consciousness, and the groups of consciousness. When we form a circle and do spiritual work, we form a group mind between us. And the problem is crowds develop group minds, which can end up as something like a French Revolution that happened before. But because there's a loss of will, there's a loss of the will, there's a loss of personal responsibility. You see, and I think the illness here is conformity. People being conformists. The illness we have in the world called woke, and it is an illness, whatever way you look at it, it's an illness. Woke that expresses itself in, particularly in all the gender mix-ups, and particularly in all the BBC-style censorship, and particularly in the idea that a person can't actually have any view other than the standard view. This is all a form of conformity, and the average person is a conformist. Silence there, because are you? The average person is a conformist. They're like the cows all waiting in the fields, waiting for the cowboys to come to drive them off, to have them all slaughtered. They would rather wait and be told what to do than they would to think for themselves. They almost have a fear of not conforming, and it's become a major thing in our education today. You must conform, and it's done in an unconscious way. Like I say, you don't even realize you're being herded, and because people, what they do is, not everybody, but a lot of people, most people, change their behavior and they'll change their views in order to fit in. They feel they've got to fit in. The worst of all these is fashion, actually. It kind of all makes you say, you're different, dress like me. So you set a fashion, you're dressed ridiculous with an orange scarf, and next thing you know, everybody else is wearing orange scarves. And it's like an example of fashion being a good example of people conforming. Oh, I like that, I want to look like Taylor Swift, for example. And I'm not blaming her, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's like we'll all become Swifties, right? So that's a less damaging sort of danger, but there's still the same mentality. It's the rise of conformity. This is the danger. And this is where when we think spiritually, have got to think outside of the box. We've got to think differently, because we've got to say, are we conforming? Are we prepared to stand by what we truly believe and forget about left and right politics, for example. Don't forget about all of it. What do you personally believe? Don't go saying I believe what Craig believes either, because that's nonsense as well, because you've got to believe what you believe. You've got to believe what is right for you. And this is the only way we can counter the rise of the council culture. We've got to stand for what we believe. People will obey a voice of authority, whether it be a celebrity voice or whether it be a political voice, or like in the case of psychological experiments where they have someone in an experiment giving someone an electric shock in another room, and they will put it up to death-defying levels, death-like levels of electric shock. If the scientist says it's all right, you can give them another shock. Next thing you know, they're doing this experiment because they will conform. And similarly, exactly the same thing happened in the gas chambers. People conformed. They felt they should obey what the authority tells them. So how do we get around that? Well, the words I use for myself with this thing is, the most important thing is not necessarily be a nonconformist or anything like that. It's simply this: don't imitate. Just don't imitate people. Be who you are. And if that means being unconventional, then be unconventional. Unconventional. I still can't say it. Unconventional. That sounds wrong, doesn't it? But it means you've got to do your own thing. You see, how can you know the truth of something if you've not standing by the basic simple things of being who you are? It's not somebody else's truth. Someone else can't tell you truth. Truth has to be yours. And this is where we differ in many ways from artificial intelligence, isn't it? You see, artificial intelligence can only take other people's truth. It can only imitate. It can imitate being a human being. It can imitate being clever. It can imitate being highly spiritual even, but it can't be that thing. The important thing about being a human being is that our truth is unique to our consciousness. The understanding of truth, even those universal truths of love and things and peace and etc., there might be these gigantic truths of Brahman and things, but it's still your uniqueness to that. As humans, we are unique. So why should we imitate anybody else? And this is where it's all going wrong. And this is why people feel unhappy, because they're trying to fall asleep. They're trying to conform, and are you afraid to be wrong, for example? I stick my neck out all the time doing these predictions, and I know sometimes I get them wrong, and there'll be all the what they call trolls come in and say, well, what, he's got it wrong, and okay, fine. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't, but sometimes I'll get much more than you could possibly get by statistical throws out statistical analysis of it. How could he possibly have known that and get it better than the punters? But that only comes because you've got the courage of your convictions. And again, you mustn't be scared in life to be wrong, because sometimes you are. And then you obviously got to make the change. If you're going to imitate anything, well, imitate good behavior when you see it, and try not to imitate bad behavior. But most importantly, if you just be yourself and say, I'm not going to imitate, I mean, look at the number of people out there that are psychics that imitate my work, for example, who pick up my predictions and put them out as their own, word for word. Sometimes I used to have a website when I used to do this before the YouTube channel I had here, and I used to put all my predictions down. I used to find them copy pasted onto websites all over the place, and I used to hide little words in there in comments, because you could hide comments underneath in the comment tags in the text, so I could find, this has been stolen from Craig, this is not my prediction. They'd sometimes leave my name on it and claim it as their own. They'd miss it off. So that's plagiarism, a different type of thing. That's copying, but it's still a form of this imitation. We don't want to imitate. I don't want to imitate being Jesus Christ even. I mean, that's what St. Francis used to say. He used to do the imitation of Christ. All I will do is imitate Christ until I become Christ-like. And he did. But that might be a model, but you've still got to be you. Like I say, everything in the universe has to be your unique truth, and sometimes it means being courageous enough you've got to be fearless in life, really. You mustn't be fearful of what happens into your life. You've got to just say, I don't know the answers. But that's my first step. The fact that I don't know the answers, I'm not going to get the answers from someone else, but I've got to find it directly myself. Only I can realize truth. Same for you. And sometimes it's also important sometimes to be an idiot actually as well, because the ego can get in the way. I mean, you look at some of the great brilliant comedians in the world, Monty Python's team are a good one. They brilliant minds actually, but they could be silly, or the Goons were before that. They could be silly. Clever people can sometimes be silly. That's because because we're prepared to be unconventional. We're prepared to be ourselves, and you come up with something unique. You come up with something where you do not imitate others. So we've got a revolution coming. We've got troubles in the world ahead. There's going to be mass movements. There's going to be mass religious movements, perhaps, as time comes on, as we move towards the more spiritual age. But I'm not a joiner in many respects. I'm not a person that wants to imitate others. I want to be my own person. I don't want followers either. I just want to be who I am. And that's how you must be too, I feel, particularly if we have these times with these growing forces in the world for left and right in politics. And we'll see the similar things growing culturally. We'll see similar things growing religiously and things. But ultimately, we've got to think for ourselves. Think for yourself. Don't imitate. That, I believe, is the medicine to get us through some of these difficult ways ahead. So I go off on my high horse with all this. But anyway, thanks for joining me for this. And if you've enjoyed it, do go and have a look at my website. You want more of it, if you dare, you can come to my seminars, which are more based, quite often connected with readings and things like that. Or you can read my books, because I write about it all in there. And it helps me obviously with the site to keep it moving and keep it going. If you support the site in those ways, it's a tremendous help. So anyway, thanks for joining me. Thanks for being part of it. Have a look at the seminars coming up, or the what do they call them? Webinars coming up, and have a look at the NAADI readings and the books and so forth in this website. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Give us a thumbs up before you go, and bye for now. So do you like what I have to say? And do you like my work? Well, why don't you support my work? Have a look in the description below to go to my website, find out about psychic readings, find out about our NAADI readings with the Indian NAADI Oracle, buy my books, and join my workshops online by Zoom. All there on the website psychics.co.uk.